Hey guys, welcome back to another Python coding tutorial. In this video, we're going to create a program that's going to loop through a given range and it's going to count the total number of prime numbers within that range. Then at the end of the program, it's going to output the total prime numbers as well as each prime number in the range. Okay, so I have the instructions written up here for the program and I'm going to go ahead and read those. Those say to create a program that will output all prime numbers within a range specified at the beginning by the user. The program will start by asking for the upper and lower bounds inclusive of the range. Then it will list out all primes found and the number of them that were found. You must create a function called isPrime and call it inside a loop. The isPrime function takes one value as an input parameter and returns a boolean value, true or false. The function isPrime has a single purpose to figure out if one number is prime. It will also create a main function, which is where you will loop through the range given and call isPrime repeatedly for each value tested. Okay, now that we've read those, we can begin writing the program here. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to create the main function. So I'm going to say def main. Okay, now all of our main code is going to be inside of that main function here. Then I want to print a print statement telling the user what the program is going to be doing. So I'm going to say this program will output all prime numbers within a given range. Okay, then I also want to print you will need to enter the upper and lower bounds. Okay, so after that, we give the user the little introduction here, which is what I always like to do with my programs. Then we can start asking them for the input. So first I want to ask them for the upper bound, which is going to be an integer. So it's going to be int input. Please enter the upper bound. All right, and I'm just going to call that variable upper. Okay, and now I'm going to create the variable lower, and I'm going to get the lower bound, which is also going to be an integer input. Please enter the lower bound. Okay. Now after we've done that, at this point in the program, there are 0 prime numbers. So I want to create the variable that's going to keep a tally of the total prime numbers, and I want to set that equal to 0. So I'm going to say total prime numbers equals 0. Okay, now after that, we want to print out a little heading for above where we're going to list all of the prime numbers. So below this heading, we're going to list all the prime numbers. So I want to say print the prime numbers in the range are, and we want to make sure we do that now, so we do it outside of our loop because we only want it to print one time in the program. Okay. So now is when I can begin creating our loop here. So I want to say for value in range, and then the range is going to be the lower bound up to the upper bound inclusive. So we have to say +1 here. And that's going to make sure that we include the upper bound. Okay. And then in this range, we want to test if a number is prime. So for each number, for each value, we want to test if it's prime. So I'm going to say prime number, that's going to be our variable here, equals the isPrime function with the argument, the value. Okay, so that's going to call the isPrime function for each value in the range. Okay? Every time it goes through this for loop, it's going to call the isPrime function with the value as the argument there. Okay? So then once we get that prime number value, then we're going to say if prime number does not equal none, which this will make more sense later once we do our function, then we want to say total prime numbers, our variable that we created up here, plus equals 1. Okay, and that's going to add 1 to our tally of prime numbers. Then what we also want to do is if this prime number does not equal none executes, we want to print out the prime number. Okay, so we want to print out the number that we get back. So I'm going to say print prime number. And again, this is going to make much more sense once we create our function there. Okay, and then I want the prime number to print with the end equal to just a space here. And then I want to print out just a blank print statement there so we can get onto a new line and all of our numbers will print out in a line going down the page. So now that's all that we need for our if statement here. So now what I want to do is I want to go down here and I want to print out the final print statement saying how many total number of prime numbers there are. So I'm going to say print. There are total prime numbers, the variable there, total prime numbers in the given range. Okay, and that's what's the final thing that's going to print in our program. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create the isPrime function and define the function and write all of our code inside of there. Okay, so I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say def isPrime that it's going to, or with a parameter that it's going to accept here. So I'm going to say number. So that parameter is going to be number. So now if we go back and look at our code, we have prime number equals isPrime with the value as an argument here. So this value in this range is going to be the argument when we call the isPrime function. And then that's going to become this number variable here. That's the input parameter for the isPrime function. Okay, so now for our code in this function, we want to say if number is greater than 1, because we know that 1 is a prime number, so that's already going to be counted as a prime number. We don't have to check if it's prime. Okay, so if number is greater than 1, these are the values that we want to check and see if they're prime or not. So I'm going to say for num in range 2, because if it's greater than 1, the lowest value we could start at here is 2, all the way up to the number, not including the number itself. We don't need to include that. So basically what we're doing here is for num in range 2 to the number. So it's going to iterate the number of times through this loop for every number less than the number that we have entered in here, which will make more sense in a second, hopefully. So then I want to say prime equals number divided by, with the remainder operator, the modulus operator there, num. Okay, so hopefully this makes more sense now. So you can see that we have the number here, that was the input parameter for this function, which was the value here coming from this range. So it's going to do this for every value from the lower bound to the upper bound inclusive, is going to be this number. If it's greater than 1, then for each num in the range 2 to that number, so each num less than the number, it's going to divide the original number by the num less than that number with the remainder operator, and then we're going to get prime, the prime variable with that. So we can either have 0 or we can have a remainder from this operation here. So if prime is 0, then we know that the smaller num divides into the number and that number is not prime. If a number divides into another number and it's not 1 or that number, then it's prime. So if we get 0 from this operation here, then we know that the number is prime. If we do not get 0 for any of the numbers that are less than the number for this entire for loop, then we know the number will be prime. Okay? So we're going to do that, and then we're going to get prime. And prime is either going to be, it's going to be 0 or it's going to be a number that's not 0. So if prime equals 0, okay, so then we will want to return none. Okay? Now at this point, we just want to make sure that this num here in this range continues to increment by 1, so we get through each value here. So I want to say plus equals 1. Then I want to go down here and I want to say else. So if the number is greater than 1, and then we run through all of this code, and this return none never executes, then we're going to jump down here to this else, and we want to return the number, because then we will know that that number is prime, because there was never a time when a number less than that number, other than 1, divided evenly into that number, so it's going to be prime. Okay, so now that makes much more sense for this prime number does not equal none up here. So if none is returned up here, then none of this code down here and this if statement will execute. So we won't add 1 to the total prime numbers and we won't print out that prime number. Okay, but if this else executes, then we return the number and this will execute because prime number will not equal none. We'll print the total, or we'll add 1 to the total prime numbers, and then we'll print that number as the prime number here. Okay, so now the last thing that we need to do for this program is we need to call the main function. Okay, we defined the main way up here. We said def main, but we never called it, and without calling it, none of our code will execute. Okay, so I go down here and I say if underscore name equals main. Then we want to call the main function. Alright, so that should be it for this program. One thing I do want to show you is I made an error here. I had bound written here before, but we don't have a bound variable. I meant to say upper, which is the upper limit here that we got. So that's one thing that you'll need to go back and change if you were following my code. Alright, but other than that, we should be able to run it and see what it looks like and make sure that our output looks the way that we want it to look and that our program runs nice and smoothly. Okay, so I'm going to go run. Alright, so we got the introduction here, that's all good. Please enter the upper bound. I'm going to go with 80. Please enter the lower bound. I'll say 0 here. Okay, the prime numbers in the range are, we got all the prime numbers listed. And then we got here, where is it? There are 22 total prime numbers in the given range. Okay, perfect. So our program looks good and everything worked the way that we wanted it to. Alright, that's it for this program, and that's going to be it for this video then. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. This was our 4th functions practice video, and if you want to go back and watch the previous ones, feel free to do that. But if you enjoyed this video, I'm going to have more Python coding practices and tutorials coming out soon, so if you like watching this one, be sure to watch those. Thank you for watching.